Good evening.
Good evening. Well, just imagine a knock at the door. The news, your daughter has been taken away from you. Authorities believe you may have abused her.
The accusations are serious, and the local Children's Aid Society has done the right thing. Protect the child first, ask questions later. An investigation, when it comes, will show whether the charges are true or false. But what if there is no full investigation? What if critical questions are never asked? What if an agency with the power to seize your child believes it already knows the truth? Well, that's what happened to one Ontario family. W5's Elliot Schiff has been looking into their story. Tonight, he tells us that we still don't know whether or not the girl was abused, but it seems clear that justice was.
It started simply enough. A grade 8 class and a creative writing assignment. One essay was shocking, a disturbing tale of drugs, physical and sexual abuse. Fact or fiction? The alarmed teacher called the Halton Children's Aid Society, the CAS, the local government agency that helps save kids from abusive parents. They interviewed the 14-year-old girl who wrote the story and then her brother at school.
And they said, do your parents hit your sister or any of your siblings? So I'm like, no, they don't. I saw my sister's bag and her coat on the coat rack outside. So I knew she was there, but when I asked them if she was coming too, they said, no, she isn't. And I found that kind of surprising.
The girl was immediately placed in a foster home. A social worker from the Halton Children's Aid Society and a police officer took the brother home, where they met with the worried parents.
I was wondering where she was, whether she was safe or, what had happened to her. They told us that she had said that we had hit her and stuff like that, and how she herself had been taking different kinds of substances.
But there was more.
They said that I have inappropriately touched my daughter.
We sort of felt, what is wrong with our child? Why is she saying these things, And we really, at that point, we thought that she had come in for a nervous breakdown.
They were just in total shock.
Irene Richards, a close family friend, was visiting the day the Children's Aid Society turned up. With years of volunteer work under her belt, she could assure the family the Halton CAS was just doing its job.
Once they saw what kind of a home that the child lived in, they'd realize that, there was nothing to the story.
So the family waited, convinced their daughter would be home again soon. But just 2 weeks after being taken away by the Children's Aid Society, she tried to kill herself. An overdose. But the parents were barred from seeing their daughter at the hospital, on orders from the Halton CAS.
And I told the social worker, please, can I just see my daughter? And she said no. I told her I would crawl from my home to the CAS office. I said, I'll not talk to her. I just want to see her face. But they wouldn't. My mother and my husband and I, we just held hands and we knelt down here and we just prayed and asked that God will save our child.
It was the beginning of a 2-year ordeal. Within weeks, more heartbreaking news. A second suicide attempt. Their daughter was refusing to come home, and the longer the girl was in CAS care, the more bizarre her allegations became.
My daughter had said that we had been prostituting her, that the two of us had been injecting her with drugs.
The Halton CAS believed the girl's story of sexual abuse by her parents. But the parents had another explanation, a family history of mental illness, confirmed by a psychiatrist who treated 2 aunts for schizophrenia.
So what happened when this information was passed on to the CAS?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Where on earth are people hurting? Where is there injustice?
Enter Father Brian Pearson. He was confident he could mediate. He knew the family. They'd been with his church for more than 4 years. And he knew the Halton Children's Aid Society. He'd worked with them in the past. So he made a personal call to the director of the Halton CAS.
He said, well, I don't know enough about this case, I'll call you back, which he did in the afternoon. And when I spoke to him on the phone in the afternoon, I said, specifically, I'm concerned that nobody has checked out the mental health record history of this family. because schizophrenia is in the family. The family are saying this. And his response to me was, well, there's mental health problems, all right, with the parents.
That was the turning point for Father Brian.
I thought, this morning, you weren't familiar enough with the case to speak to me about it. This afternoon, presumably with the file open on your desk, you want to make a psychiatric assessment of the parents.
Here's the Children's Aid Society, mandated to protect children, and 6 weeks into the case, it appeared they had already made up their minds without a full investigation. The director of the Halton Children's Aid Society, Ron Copeland, agreed to talk to us, but not about specific cases.
How do you determine that it's the parents that are the problem?
Well, sometimes family assessments help us do that. Sometimes the information, the child may be of an age where we are provided with sufficient information to see that, or we simply track the situation for long enough to begin to understand it.
And how would you do that? You mean tracking the situation?
We would see the parent on a regular basis.
Is that something that you normally do?
Oh, yes. We would normally see a parent on a regular basis over a period of time if we believe our involvement is necessary.
Would there ever be a case where you wouldn't go interview the family or spend time with them?
I can't imagine of one.
They didn't investigate anything about the story. They have never ever spoken with us as to what our family makeup is, what things are. They have never come and observed the kids here, never made a home visit.
And they never questioned Irene Richards, even though the CAS social worker knew how close she was to the family.
I was obviously a family friend, that they would come and ask me what kind of a family they were and what my relationship with the family was and had I seen anything.
The Halton CAS never interviewed Father Brian either, but the police came to interview him almost a year later. They investigated the child's allegations of physical and sexual abuse. No charges were laid against the parents.
If you've determined that there has been something awful that's happened, whether it's abuse or whatever, then it's also part of your job, I guess, to go back to the family and figure out, determine exactly what's going on with the family.
Certainly, if the family is prepared for us to do that. You have to understand this is a two-way street. We're prepared to do that, but the family isn't always.
In this situation, the family absolutely was willing to cooperate and do whatever was necessary to see that their child got the care she needed and eventually, hopefully, is able to return home to them.
Jackie King, an expert in family law. The parents turned to her. In cases like this, the CAS holds all the cards. What could King do? Ask for a review, conducted by the Halton CAS's own board of directors. Even that was refused.
When my clients tried to invoke the internal review process, it was pulled. It was suspended temporarily, and we had to get it put back on.
That took an appeal to the province. Their response? When ministry staff became aware of this suspension, they advised the society that this was not acceptable. The review was on again. The board's conclusion? Its own agency had acted properly. So the father continued his fight for an independent investigation.
It took 8 months and a trip to court before they could finally get an independent expert to look at the case. She was a specialist in sexual abuse and spent more than 100 hours with the family and these documents.
Her conclusion?
The girl's allegations are false and are a result of a psychiatric disorder. I've had extensive experience with victims of sexual abuse and post-traumatic stress disorder, and she does not fit either of these profiles.
But the Halton CAS has accepted the girl's claims of abuse as fact, and she's been treated accordingly by doctors, psychiatrists, and social workers.
You can't just have a child retell her story to 15 or 20 people. That doesn't provide anything further than the initial allegations. You have to have something to verify. You have to have something more.
There was an opportunity early on to do a proper investigation of allegations that were extremely serious, and there's no evidence that that investigation ever happened.
Can you ever recall of an example where you've taken a child and never fully investigated to the best of your ability both sides of the story?
No. Frankly, I can't.
2 years and 4 suicide attempts later, the girl is now officially a ward of the state. There has been no proof of abuse, and the Halton CAS has never been back to the family home.
It's not just incompetence. It's not just paranoia. There's almost now something that feels far more almost sinister, like were they protecting themselves? Did they feel they'd made a mistake and now they couldn't possibly go back and look at it again?
The family deserve some answers to the questions that they have been posing for the last 2 years. They've never changed their story, never ever.
Dear Minister, once again I am pleading for a judicial inquiry.
Even today, I'm very scared that they would just walk in Monday and would take the other 3 kids away, because that's exactly what they did with our daughter. And I mean, there's nothing to stop them from doing that.
This could happen to anybody. And that is a far more frightening thought beyond the scope of this particular family. This could happen anywhere.
When there is an allegation of child abuse, almost everyone would agree that CAS should step in, at least until there can be an investigation. But even CAS care is no guarantee of safety. 2 weeks ago, a provincial task force in Ontario reported that increasing numbers of children have died while under the supervision of Children's Aid Societies, 162 in a 3-year period. Some of those deaths are now being investigated in a series of inquests.